Okay, y'all, I know it's been a while, but listen. I came up with this crazy Fnaf theory. This on screen, this right here, this ain't it. This isn't the crazy theory. This is the theory y'all are gonna need for context. Because a good chunk of the next theory is going to revolve around this sort of idea right here. This one. This one right here, the one you see on screen. You see this? You see this craziness right here? You see this? Yeah. Okay, so basically, this is something I have personally believed for a while, and the books are not going to be able to convince me of it because of one thing we're going to get to in a minute that just feels like some proof that this happened. Listen, y'all have heard my theories. I don't like the books. Y'all know this. So if I can avoid using the books, then I will. But anyway, yeah, like I said, this isn't even the big theory. This is the context theory that y'all are going to need, because a big chunk of the major theory is going to revolve around this being sort of like the basic context behind it. That the missing children's incident in Charlie's death happened pre-1983, at the very, very least earlier in the year, which would probably be like maybe a month or so before, depending on like when you think Fnaf 4 happens. I believe it happens during the summer, but that's a whole other thing. But anyway, yeah, with all that, let's get started. So here's a theory TLDR for y'all. The MCI and Charlie's death happened pre-1983, maybe a year or two before, or as I said earlier, at the very least, earlier that year, like June of 1983. That is the latest it will happen. But for the sake of this theory, we'll put the MCI and Charlie's death basically in either 1981 or 1982. We'll go with 1981 for now. Technically speaking, this will also make more sense in the timeline, considering how the incident is described. We'll get there. The original Freddy's, the one where the MCI happened, was opened earlier than 1983. I will prove how this could be possible. The crying child witnessed a murder, and the Fredbear plush is possessed, and I will die on this hill. Listen, we'll get there. We'll get there when we get there, okay? So we got all this? All of this makes sense right here? Y'all got all this? Okay, good. So before we start, mostly for the sake of time and simplicity, we're going to call the crying child Cassidy and the Fredbear / Golden Freddy MCI kid as Andrew. So we got that. I'm not going to explain why I call them either of these. Just, this is kind of how I refer to them in my own head. So for the sake of this theory, these are the names we will call them by, okay? Got that? Good. Okay. So the books and how the movie messes up that point. So I know the first thing everyone is going to mention is, but the books say it's in 1985. Both of the books say it's in 1985, and that's the main year we've been given, so that must be the year it happened. So let's just start with this point so I can go ahead and get it out of the way. For one thing, the Fazbear Fright books. From what I have heard, the incident is described differently, like very differently. To my memory, I've heard that the bodies were found immediately. Like, this is also sort of shown in the game that everyone was running around because, Spring Bonnie shows up. He shows Oswald the room with the dead kids. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And that there were 6 children. 6. So, incident is described entirely differently from how we know it happened. We got that good. The Silver Eyes trilogy. Okay. So, I haven't read the books because 1, I don't have time for that. 2, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't seem like a lot of people can agree on, what from the books is meant to, be applied to the games, so there's also that point. And so from my memory, and from what I've heard, Charlie's age is kind of inconsistent throughout the Silver Eye novels. In one book she's 17, then she's kind of 15, and apparently from what I read on the wiki, that's supposed to be explained by her being a robot is why her age seems so inconsistent, but again, also these are the books where Charlie's a robot, and where they also made Circus Baby and / Elizabeth, whatever you want to call her, like that. Y'all know what I mean. Y'all understand what I mean by that. Okay, moving on. Then we've got the movie, which is where the point gets messed up. about how in most other universes, the year is 1985. In the movie, the MCI year is 1987. In my eyes, this could be evidence for the MCI year being inconsistent by a timeline, or universe, whatever you want to call it, continuity, who cares? But basically, why would they change the year to 87 and not make it 85 and effectively confirm the death year as being 1985? Why make it 87 when this could be a thing of saying, hey, the death year is 1985? Like, just period, full stop, all that. And so the TLDR for this one is that I don't like the books for multiple reasons, and it adds confusing stuff to the lore. Cough, cough, remnant. I have a sort of love-hate relationship with Remnant, okay? It's why I try to avoid mentioning it as much in theories as possible. Like, if you're going to mostly explain stuff in the books, then make it a book thing. Don't add that to the games and then just mostly explain stuff in the books. What if people can't read the books? And considering a lot of the other weird details that the books kind of just throw in there, why? Look, I think Remnant's a cool concept and everything. One, I just think the fact that it's in the games where kids are murdered at a Chuck E. Cheese-like place and haunt the animatronics is a bit of a weird place to put Remnant and stuff. As well as the fact that, in my opinion, it should be mostly a book thing since it is mostly explained in the books and is mostly just vaguely brought up in the games. Mostly just mentioned. So we've got all that. I don't like the books unless I try to use them as less as possible. Good? Okay, moving on. Okay, this is doing weird things, it's fine. Here are some other reasons for this version of the timeline to make sense. The incident is always described as taking place a long time ago, even in the FNAF 2 Night 1 phone call. The phone guy says that the old location was left to rot for quite a while. Now sure, okay, maybe 2 years could count as quite a while, but just, why would you describe 2 years like that? Quite a while makes it sound like just 2 years feels too short for it to be described as quite a while. It feels like it's been closed for a long time. And it would also explain a lot of stuff from FNAF 4. Trust me, it explains a lot and we will get there. And before anyone mentions the tokens, because I know someone's going to mention the year 1983 being on the tokens. A friend of mine in real life mentioned another possible explanation for the year 1983 being on the tokens. The long story short is that could be when the company was founded, not when the restaurant opened. Maybe Freddy's, after Fazbear Entertainment as a company was founded, was able to get some custom tokens for the arcade. Also, if you think about it, this would make more sense realistically. And I know you're probably rolling your eyes when I say realistically, considering the direction these games have gone. Nothing here is realistic, but, just think about this for a moment. Even if they had made enough money off the diner to open a new restaurant, which is probably where they got the money to open Freddy's in the first place, wouldn't they probably be more worried about making sure the animatronics actually work and that the place stays open for a few months before making the things like the tokens? Why would you just go ahead and also make all these custom tokens on the chance that this place might not be as successful as the other place? Why would you want to risk that? So think about it. It would be more realistic if that's how it worked. Why would you just go ahead and get these nice, cool, shiny new tokens if you've just opened the place up? I'm just saying, and my friend is just saying, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Just feels like a risky thing in case this thing is not as successful as you're hoping it's going to be. Okay, I think that's... Oh yeah, also, the question of William's motive. Listen, we don't technically know what William's motive even is. We really don't, if you think about it. Even in the books, his motive isn't clear. I asked someone on Tumblr the question of if William's motive was ever explained in the books, specifically the novel trilogy, and apparently it isn't even explained there either. Like, it's just sort of kind of implied that Charlie's murder was because of William's jealousy towards Henry, because we're given basically nothing else for why he would have just killed his business partner and best friend's daughter. Why would he do that? And, like, that's the closest thing to a motive we're given. His motive in the books also can't even be the death of one of his kids. The only child he seems to have that we hear of in the books is Elizabeth, and she died sometime after Charlie did. We know this. So it couldn't have been the death of a child, at least as far as we know. Because as far as we know, he doesn't have another child. And so basically, while it's a possibility that in the games his motive could be related to Cassidy's death, it's not 100% confirmed. We don't know for a fact that's what it was. In fact, from what I know, it's only been recently brought up that Afton might not have even really had a motive, at least when he got started. That maybe, even for Charlie's murder, in people's, theories and stuff, headcanons even, where Charlie's death was the first, I've actually seen, some explanations of, maybe William was drunk the night that Charlie, he was obviously drunk the night Charlie died, if Midnight Motorist is anything to go off of. But I have another idea for Midnight Motorist, which will be for the main theory. We'll get there next time. So basically, William's an alcoholic, and he was most likely drunk the night that he murdered Charlie. And I've seen possible explanations for why or how Charlie got murdered range from he accidentally hit her or run her over with his car while speeding, or that he got out and killed her while he was drunk. Maybe he didn't even realize what he had done just yet. So basically, we don't 100% know if Cassidy's death was his motive. For all we know, he could have killed someone before Cassidy died in 83. In fact, that's what we're about to get into. Oh, you thought I was done? No, we're not. We're moving on to Fnaf 4. Prepare yourselves. So what's Psychic Friend Fredbear's deal, okay? So, we all know the very common belief of, it's just William talking through a walkie-talkie to keep an eye on his son. Well, here's some reasons I don't believe that. So, you've got these two things right here, right? You got the flower, you got the sewers. How did he... First off, what is this? Why? How? Huh? And then you just got this. Why would he be in the sewers all of a sudden? Why are you going there? Best see what are you doing there. And then you've got these two, which are going to be important for later. Hurry the other way and find someone who will help. William, that's your son. If this were William speaking to his son, why would he not tell his son to, come over there to him and he'll keep him safe? Sure, you could say, it's because this guy's right here. He'll look like an animatronic and that'll scare Cassidy. He could have just told the guy to get out of the way. Besides, he would have been right there. He would have been entirely willing to protect his son if this was him saying, basically what I'm saying is, if William's right here, perfectly capable of helping keep his son safe and comforting him, why would he tell him to go the other way to the other side of the restaurant to find someone else who's going to help him? Then, of course, you've got the stuff underlined in yellow, and yes, there's a reason why this is underlined in a different color. You know what will happen if he catches you in reference to this guy, and if you try to go to the left before this guy shows up, don't you remember what you saw? Keep this in mind. Keep these two things in mind here. Why would William say that to his son? Unless, of course, it's not William. There's also this detail right here, which, let me ramble about this scene real quick. So one of the things that the speaker says in this scene is, "We're still your friends. Do you still believe that?" If William were the one saying this, then the question is who he would be meaning by we. The only two people we have it confirmed to be in the hospital room with Cassidy while he was dying were Michael and William. If by we, William was referring to him and Michael, then we have problems. Because this entire time he would have been convincing Cassidy that his brother hated him. Why would he just now be saying something like, "We are still your friends," referring to Michael? It doesn't make sense. If William is referring to the plushies, then we have another problem there, because William can't see into his son's mind. How would he know his son is seeing the plushies? Just how would he know? He wouldn't. So if the we he's referring to is the plushies, then that still wouldn't make any sense. So basically, this entire scene to me just says this can't be William. So, with all that out of the way of why I don't think it's William and that it's someone else, also keep these in mind because it's going to be important for me explaining who I think is actually talking to the crying child. Now, you may have seen my other Fnaf Theories videos where I mentioned some of my own personal Fnaf theories with zero remnant involved. And you probably know where this is going if you've seen that video, but we'll get there in a minute. So, now I feel like we need to get to the MCI kid, the Fredbear MCI kid, Andrew. So what happened to Andrew? Let's start off with the Give Gifts, Give Life game. As we all know, for most of the game it's just the player playing as the puppet / Charlie and 4 out of 5 of the other MCI kids. Gabriel, Susie, Jeremy, and Fritz. And it's not until you put the last animatronic head on one of the kids that the 5th child will suddenly show up and then you get a Golden Freddy jump scare. So where were they? Why is the 5th child not included here? What makes them different? Now, anyone who's seen dual process theory / timeline, I can't remember what exactly it was, or if you've probably been in one of those FNAF 4 debates on what's going on in the mini games, then you'll probably guess what this is referring to. Is this wires or is this hair debate. And so, if these were wires, we'd probably see something similar on this suit, but we don't. And I have a feeling that this suit would have to be different than this one, because this one's just, it's green. It's like, these are different colors. But also, like, if these were wires, then wouldn't we also see those on, like, other suits? We don't see wires here. So these would have to be hair then. But that's not the last thing. This isn't the nail in the coffin. The nail in the coffin is what's going on up here. Now, many people before me have pointed out the whole Golden Freddy twitching into the void looks a lot like a spring lock failure. Or what happens when someone's dying from one. I know I'm not the first person to point this out. I'm not claiming to be the first person to point this out. What I'm saying is that I think Andrew was spring-locked. Spring-locked in the Fredbear suit by William, and that's how he was killed. This is potentially Andrew's hair, maybe, or meant to be a clue that someone died in here. So basically, long story short, the Fredbear MCI kid, aka Andrew in this case, was killed at Fredbear's by being spring-locked. And so that's why they weren't here, because they weren't with the other 4 kids when they were murdered. He wasn't there because he was killed at Fredbear's and by being spring-locked. But I know some of y'all are probably going to ask, because I've forgotten. We'll get to this in a minute, ignore that. So what I'm saying is basically Andrew got spring-locked, in the Fredbear suit, right? We got that, right? I'll elaborate more on what happened here in a minute because I know some of y'all are going to ask, but if it was at Fredbear's, I think I'll go ahead and answer it now. Sorry if I'm all over the place. I'm trying to remember exactly what I had in this presentation because my brain's everywhere with this theory. So I know some of y'all are going to say, but if this was before 1983 and it closed down after the bite, then where would William have hid the body? Wouldn't the body have been found like almost instantly? And that's where I have to say William moved the body and dumped it someplace else. Someplace where no one was going to be able to find it, or at least where no one would think to look. Now, as for where that is, that's for the next theory. So anyway, with all that out of the way, next slide that you saw earlier. What Cassidy saw. You remember these? Remember these? So, given the pictures you can see on screen here, you can probably tell where I'm going with this. So we know that Cassidy has a big fear of the animatronics. He's terrified of them, hates going to Fredbear's because he doesn't want to see the animatronics. But the question is, what did he see? What traumatized him? Because the Fredbear plush implies that Cassidy saw something that traumatized him, something that started all of this. But the question is what? Well, what if I were to tell you that Cassidy witnessed his dad murder a kid he might have been close to even, but he saw his dad kill him while in the spring Bonnie suit. So from Cassidy's perspective, maybe he saw an animatronic kill a kid by spring locking them. And Cassidy was terrified. Whether William was at this point aware of what his son had witnessed is kind of irrelevant. You can believe what you want to believe on that one. But what if this means that the reason Cassidy was so scared of being locked in a back room wasn't just because of the animatronic parts in there? What if he was scared because of one of the things he had witnessed in that room, something not even Michael knew about at this time? What if he had witnessed a kid die in this room, in the suit right next to him, and that's what scared him so bad? He's not just scared of all the heads, the endoskeleton parts. He's scared because the last time he was really in this room, he witnessed a kid die. So that's what I think Cassidy saw. He saw his dad kill someone while dressed as Spring Bonnie, thought that Spring Bonnie had effectively gotten a kid killed or killed the kid himself, and that traumatized him horribly. Again, whether William is entirely aware of what Cassidy saw that day is a bit irrelevant, at least right now. Basically, it's not an important piece of, for this theory. You can believe whether William knew what Cassidy had seen or not. But basically, that's that. Okay, so now we're going to get to the part that still astonishes me. Why does no one talk about the Pigtail Girl dialogue? Every time I see stuff from Fnaf 4 getting brought up, no one mentions what this girl says. What she says is, "You'd better watch out. I hear they come to life at night. And if you die, they hide your body and never tell anyone." Now, I've seen two explanations for what the Pigtail Girl is talking about. Explanation number one, she's referring to spring-lock suits in general. Kids saw employees being helped into suits, and thus that's where they hide your body and never tell anyone. They think the people are dead for some reason. Somehow the rumor implies these people are dead, even though they obviously wouldn't be. They're still walking around town. And some of these kids, all I'm saying is, so that's where the theory of that falls apart for me. That can't be what she's really talking about. The second explanation I have heard for what she's referring to is a spring lock failure. We know from some of the tape recordings from Fnaf Theory that there were in fact spring lock failures at Fredbear's Family Diner. Because multiple simultaneous spring lock failures and all that. So this could be referring to that, is what I've heard people say. That's where the hiding your body, never telling anyone, could be where a spring lock failure happened and the company tried to cover it up. But that still doesn't explain the come to life at night. Like, I hear they come to life at night, referring to animatronics. They hide your body. The only they we've heard about in this conversation would be the animatronics. This can't be the company she's referring to. Because the only thing we've heard of they coming to life at night would be the animatronics. And then why would she refer to an entirely different they in this conversation, being the company? Like, nobody ever mentions the Pigtail Girl dialogue. No one mentions this big problem here with what she's saying. They're just like, oh, must be spring lock suits, or oh, must be a spring lock failure. But neither of those would explain what she's talking about. The only thing that would explain what she's talking about is how the animatronics began to behave after the missing children's incident. That's pretty much the only thing that would line up with exactly what she's talking about. This is another reason I don't think that the MCI happening in 1985 would work. Because then what is she talking about? Before the MCI happened, we don't hear of anything else, though. We don't hear of any animatronics coming to life or anything. Like, let me explain it like this. If the MCI really did happen in 1985 in the games, then what would have happened before that would make the animatronics come to life at night, kill people, and then hide their bodies? We're not really told of anything else. Sure, I've seen some people claim like maybe the employees who died in the spring lock failures possessed the animatronics and then started, killing employees after hours. But like, to our knowledge, Golden Freddy, which seems to be Fredbear, is only possessed by a kid or kids. We don't hear of an adult really possessing animatronics until we get to stuff like Springtrap. The only explanation for this would be the MCI happening first, and those deaths being some of the first in the timeline. Whether you believe the MCI kids died first and then Charlie died after them, or Charlie dying first, it doesn't really matter, because those would be the first deaths in the timeline, and they would make these make sense. Even after this, she asks Cassidy why he looks so worried after she mentions the animatronics coming to life at night and then killing people. Why would he look worried about that besides, just being scared of the animatronics? Unless he knows why they're like that. What I'm saying is that if the MCI hasn't happened at this point, this entire thing doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. And sure, I've heard the whole thing of Scott retconned something from Fnaf 4, but like, even if there was this was the thing he retconned. For one thing, he's never mentioned specifically that it was this, and two, there's still things in this game. See, the Fredbear plush, Psychic Friend Fredbear, that still implies that the MCI happened first. This is our strongest piece of evidence, though, for that happening, and I don't think, at least I haven't heard, that this is the thing that was retconned in the lore. Like, are y'all understanding this? Like, no one ever mentions Pigtail Girl and her dialogue. No one. And no one has given a satisfactory theory for me that would explain what she's talking about besides the MCI and Charlie's death. I've heard basically nothing that explains that as well as the MCI happening. If anyone else can think of some other good explanations, I would love to hear them. Again, I don't think it could be employees possessing the suits after spring lock failures, because we're basically not given any real evidence that any adults possessed those suits. And I don't think it could be the shadow animatronics, because at least in the main games, we're not talking about the Fnaf AR game. The shadow animatronics don't seem to be like really hostile towards any employees. And we're not counting the Shadow Bonnie showing up in FNAF 2 and crashing your game. That does not count. That's not him really killing the player. That's different from Golden Freddy jump scaring you and crashing the game. Because he doesn't jump scare you, he just kind of appears, stands there for a few seconds, and then your game crashes. That's a different thing. So we've got all that down? Okay, good. So to summarize, and I'll get down here in a second because, trust me, I'll explain this in a second. The Fredbear plush is possessed by Andrew, who is the same as this kid. Well, at least I just put this up to like show, Golden Freddy spirit. He's the one who speaks throughout most of the nights, speaking through the plushie to Cassidy, trying to guide him through the days, helping him the best he can. The plushies, at the very least metaphorically and in the final minigame, are meant to represent the other MCI kids, Susie, Fritz, Gabriel, and Jeremy. We'll get to why this is in just a second, but it's basically has something to do with the whole crying child looking at the plushies on his first, when you interact with the plushies and him saying, "These are my friends." And then with the plushies fading behind him, the Fredbear plush says, "We are still your friends." And if this is true, then that would mean that the other plushies are meant to, metaphorically at least, be the other MCI kids. Potentially literally being them if they're there in the final minigame. Now, why do I say that this little guy specifically is Charlie? Because I know some people are going to use the argument of the lighter yellow text being another character entirely. Because that's what people have said before. Why would Scott just suddenly change the color slightly when it's been consistent through the whole game except for this one scene? So if you want to make the argument that the speaker in the Fredbear plush is someone different, then that would be Charlie. Realistically, these two probably would have known each other. Their dads were friends, their dads were co-workers. It just makes sense if they knew each other. Of course she would say, "We're still your friends. Do you still believe that?" And so basically, again, if you want to make the argument that these two are different speakers, then I still have an explanation for who's speaking here. So if we got all that, have I explained who everyone is properly? Okay, good. So yeah, this was my longer explanation for that. It's crying child going, "These are my friends," talking about his plushies. And then with the plushies behind him, Fredbear plush going, "We are still your friends, do you still believe that?" It's you guys get my point with that, right? I'm making sense, right? Okay. So to conclude with this, I'm going to give you the timeline explanation as it stands right now. It is the year 1981. We're going with that year for the start. William is drunk one night, very incredibly drunk. Should not be driving, but he is. And maybe he's angry at Henry for some reason. Maybe because we know from the books that William was jealous of Henry. Maybe he was upset with him again for some unknown reason. The reason doesn't really matter considering what's about to happen. And he drives by either Freddy's or Fredbear's, depending on where you believe both the take cake to the children / Charlie's death happened. Whether you believe it was at Fredbear's or Freddy's doesn't really matter for this theory. But he drives by and he sees Charlie out in the rain. Maybe he's angry enough at Henry that he decides to take it out on Charlie. Maybe he runs her over while he's speeding through the alley, intentionally or not. But either way, he kills Charlie, and unfortunately, the puppet was too late to save her. It collapses on her body in the rain, and she goes on to possess it. William would then, maybe just a bit later, let's see. So depending on when Charlie's death happens, maybe it's a few days, maybe it's a couple of months, who knows, doesn't really matter. But later on, he then kills 4 more kids at Freddy's. Susie, Fritz, Gabriel, and Jeremy. And then at Fredbear's, he kills a fifth kid, Andrew, by spring-locking him to death inside a Fredbear. Unbeknownst to him, or known to him, depends on what you believe, his son Cassidy witnesses this murder, but he doesn't know it was his father, at least not at this point. He sees what he believes to be Spring Bonnie killing one of his friends. Now again, potentially unbeknownst to William, or again, he knew this, depends on what you believe. All of these kids that he had killed had been some of his son's closest friends, and now he had witnessed this animatronic that he's been hearing rumors about in the news, having seemingly potentially killed his other friends over at Freddy's, has now killed one of his only other friends, Andrew, right in front of him, and it traumatizes him. William dumps the body. Again, where it is going to be important later, but not right here. We'll get there in the next video. And for like the next couple of years, Cassidy's basically inconsolable. He doesn't really know how to explain to anyone else what he saw that day in the back room of Fredbear's. His brother is bullying him. His sister is kind of just going along with her life. But he does have someone there watching over his shoulder. Andrew, possessing his old Fredbear plush, trying to guide him along the best he can as a spirit, and trying to help keep an eye on his old friend. And then one day, Michael messes up really badly, and by one day, I mean Cassidy's birthday at Fredbear's, and he puts his brother in the mouth of Fredbear, and Fredbear bites down. But you see, unfortunately, this is where I'm going to end the timeline for now. That's right. To be continued, guys. The next video is going to go over my big conspiracy theory. Yep, I'm calling it a conspiracy theory. Because it is that crazy, and I'm very much aware that I am 99% sure that I am wrong. However, my brain started connecting some dots, and they didn't stop connecting. So basically, here we are. Now, this video is probably going to be out in the next few days. And, as far as I know, I've got other things to take care of, but once those things are done, then y'all are gonna get my big old conspiracy theory. Trust me, this video is for context, because this entire theory you saw right here is basically going to be, important for, understanding the next theory, because the next theory kind of hinges on this one, that you at least can suspend your disbelief and go, okay, so if Charlie and the MCI were already dead by this point, then the theory, like I said, we're gonna get there, I promise. But for now, to be continued, y'all. Prepare yourselves.